Good morning. This is Dishha Bagchi for ThePrint, and we're back with Lieutenant General H.S. Panag to discuss his column from this week. Want to stop fratricide? Don't entrust amateurish religious teachers with soldiers' well-being. Welcome back, General. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Disha. Always a pleasure to discuss my column with you.
So, in this week's column, you look at a growing concern within the Indian Army, which is fratricide and the lack of proper structures in place to cater to soldiers' mental well-being. So to begin with, could you explain to our viewers what is fratricide and fragging?
See, the dictionary meaning of fratricide is the act of killing one's brother or member of one's tribe or group. Now, in the armies, we consider ourselves to be one big family, and the unit is a more cohesive pattern of that particular, enlarged family, and all soldiers are brothers in arms. Uh, Fratricide, as such, is not a formal military term, uh, but it, in generic terms, describes the killing of a colleague, a subordinate, or a superior. Uh, the charge, however, as an offense, is always that of murder to punish the individual. Now, uh, military is the nation's instrument of last resort, and organized use of force against the enemy of the state is the sine qua non of military. Hence, fratricide, where you kill your colleague, subordinate, or superior, is considered a very heinous crime. It also covers when own troops fire on own troops, assuming that they are firing on the enemy or under the impression that they are firing on the enemy. This happens in the fog of war, in the confusion of battle, like in our own case during Pulwama, after the Pulwama terrorist attack, one of our own air defense battery shot down our own helicopter. And the individuals have been punished for that. And this is also covered under uh, fratricide. Now, the degree of the prevalence of fratricide is a reflection of the state of morale, discipline, and leadership of an army. Uh, a case in point is the United States, which coined the term, or it got coined by the soldiers themselves, called fragging. Uh, Towards the fag end of, rather towards the late 60s, after 3 years of intense fighting, it was clear to the soldiers and the leadership alike that this is a unpopular and an unwinnable war. Now, a large part of the army was consisting of conscripts who came in for 1 year, as 2 years tour of duty. The discipline was low, motivation was low, and leadership standards had fallen, to very low levels again. Now, in this, the frustrated soldiers and in such an environment, first they vent their anger on the civilian population. And there were a number of massacres in Vietnam, the most famous one being the My Lai massacre. And hundreds of innocent, Vietnamese were killed by the marauding, almost marauding soldiers. Now, apart from this, they also turned on their own. And uh, so the most popular weapon used was the grenade. Now, why the grenade? Because the grenade doesn't leave any telltale signs. It is not issued by name to any individual. And availability and poor accounting in times of war, availability is always there. A soldier can always keep a grenade or two and say that he has used them in the combat during the day. Now, so long as you pull the pin and leave no fingerprint, and on the lever which you hold, there's nothing left of the grenade. and it fragments into hundreds of pieces, and it's very effective in killing. Uh, and there's an instance that happened on 23rd October 1970 when Marine private, this is what a soldier is called it's a rank in US Army. He lobbed a grenade. His name was Gary Hendricks. He lobbed a grenade through the air vent of his sergeant's bunker. The sergeant's name was Richard Tate, killing him and injuring two other sergeants. Now, not that this is the incident that led to the name of fragging for fratricide, but so rampant was the crime of fragging that between 69 and 71, 730 cases of fratricide were recorded. And some people say the figure was as high as 1,000. In fact, a United States senator made a remark that more officers were killed by own soldiers, killed by fragging, than they were killed in actual combat. So this was far from the truth, but it was for the sake of highlighting the extent of fragging in the United States Army. So this I highlighted to give what can happen to a ill-disciplined army with poor leadership and with poor motivation. Now, the same army, United States Army, which from a conscript army became an all-volunteer army, had very few cases of fratricide in the period from 2003 when they were at war with the 2001 rather at war with Afghanistan and then Iraq. Over a period of 10 years, only 2 to 3 cases were reported. Having said that, the armies have a sort of a obsession with covering up cases of fratricide and suicide to safeguard their reputation. So most of these cases get shown as accidental fire or due to enemy or terrorist action. So the actual number of cases is never nearly known.
Right. So, in your column, you mentioned two recent cases of fratricide in the Indian Army. Could you talk a little bit about that and what is the overall rate of fratricide in our armed forces?
You see, these two cases got highlighted because the press got wind of them. One of them had taken place in a police station, so the police had to be informed, and which consequently the press got hold of the case. And the second case, it was happened in Jammu and Kashmir in a Rashtriya Rifle unit, where again, in such cases, probably it got leaked out and information came in the public domain. The army was very reluctant to part with information about these two cases also, which I highlighted, while answering the previous question. Now, in the first instance, a soldier shot dead 4 colleagues, who were sleeping. And initially, there were rumors spread by the offender himself that he saw a man with a turban carrying AK-47, implying that some Khalistanis had come in and done this crime. And there were all kinds of speculations, including what was fueled by the army itself, trying with the intention of possible cover-up. But what finally emerged through police investigations and Army's own investigation was that it was a case of sexual assault, a case of homosexuality, where these 4 individuals had been exploiting this young soldier, and he then stole a rifle, hid it, and the search for the rifle was still on, and after 2 nights, at night when they were sleeping, he went and killed 4 of them altogether. The second case was probably one of the few of its kind, where an officer was involved, a major from a Rashtriya Rifle Battalion in Thana Mandi in the Rajouri, district. The details of this case never came to light fully because first it is said that on a post or wherever he held he collected all the weapons of the post and then held the Jawans hostage. Uh, so details are not clear. This is just speculation, I must add. But the end result was that finally, when his commanding officer and others went to speak to him to surrender, he opened fire and also threw a grenade in which three officers were injured, including his own commanding officer. It's a very rare case. Why I said that was because it's very rare for an officer to get involved with this. So these two cases brought the spotlight back on fratricide cases in the Indian Army. There are no statistics have been formally published by the Indian Army, giving out the details as to what has happened since 1947 or in the last 2 decades or so. But sometimes a parliamentary question gets raised and some answers are given. So I picked up two answers. That one I think was covering the period 2000 to 2012, span of about 11, 12 years. There were 83 cases. That's roughly about seven to eight cases a year. And then the second was related to 2014 to 2021. There were 18 cases and two from the Air Force. So about 20 cases. So this, over a span of 7 years, was down to about three. Like I said, a large number of cases are covered up by the organization to safeguard its own reputation and shown as enemy fire and or accidental fire. So actual cases may be a little higher. In my personal assessment, it's about 6 to 10 cases a year do take place, and whatever I have observed in my 40 years service. Considering that close to 40 to 50% of our army is involved in near combat situations, in counterinsurgency, as well as on the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, which remains active. The line of actual control only gets activated after an incident, but line of control in Jammu and Kashmir remains active. And of course, there are some soldiers are in insurgency environment in the northeast still. So considering that 50% of our army remains in combat, these cases are not alarming, but I would say that they are a matter of concern, and army must take remedial action.
Right. So we discussed the different cases, both in the Indian and the US Army, and what might be some of the reasons behind them. But what do you think are some of the causes currently of fratricide in the Indian Army, especially?
I think they're common to all armies, almost, but specific to us. Poor leadership climate, where a leader is authoritarian, aloof from his soldiers. He doesn't know them. He leads a little privileged life. And then he is not concerned about the welfare of his soldiers. So poor leadership climate, lack of discipline. If you do not enforce discipline and do not do everything through personal example and other things, the discipline falls. Yeah, at times to gain popularity or show low cases of breach of discipline, you know, omissions and acts of commission are ignored. So low discipline, when it prevails, is another cause. A perceived unfair treatment. This is a very, very normal cause. When a soldier feels, common cause rather, when a soldier feels that he's been unfairly treated by his superiors or by his colleagues, it also triggers fratricide. Poor welfare. When you don't look after the welfare of soldiers, if their food is not proper, they don't get adequate rest, they are not sent on leave when required. So this poor welfare is another reason. Interpersonal rivalry. What most people don't realize is that soldiers lead a very regimented and a kind of disciplined, I would say almost schoolboyish life. you are living in close proximity, and the living conditions in the field areas are very poor, and actually you are packed together in bunkers and in close proximity of each other. This leads to interpersonal rivalry because of various things. Sometimes just playing cards and a rivalry sort of takes place. Then a psychological victimization, humiliation, and sexual harassment by either by the colleagues or by the superiors. Both, it can happen both ways, because from the colleagues, because they're living in proximity of each other, and by the superior who has got a deviant mind. So you single out a person for this kind of harassment, and this is the cause. And like I said, this was the cause in the first case of sexual harassment, the first case at Bhatinda that I highlighted. Now the stress and strain of service. Now this is the kind of it forms the backdrop, which we have discussed before also. It is because of the rigors of military life, regimental life, under the shadow of the gun, and particularly in the field areas, prolonged separation from your families. Almost 50% of the time, a soldier spends away from the family. Inability to cope with domestic commitments, lack of community living. You don't get to live like normal people who can go to the town, to market, and so on. Everything is restricted, even in peace areas. So your community life is restricted within the community, and in the field there is no community life as such. Then uh, sexual frustration. Soldiers are staying away from family. So these are the causes of stress and strain. But the major trigger is provided by an incident which is related to what I mentioned earlier, like humiliation, unfair treatment, and poor leadership climate, etc. So these are the main reasons. Stress and strain omnipresent, and number of other reasons that I highlighted, out of which a slight, humiliation, harassment are, act as the triggers. And this is what happens. And probably something like this must have happened in the case of the major. Either he felt humiliated by the commanding officer, or his leave, etc., was not sanctioned. One doesn't know the details, but the army did say that the major was in a state of shock. Shock from what? From one, omnipresent stress and strain, and a trigger that led to all this.
Right, right. So now that we know some of the causes of fratricide, what do you think is the way forward for the Indian Army to prevent this from occurring, and what steps do you think it can take?
See, not only Indian Army, I would say for any army. Uh, of course, most of the uh, problems which are causes which are there can be taken care of by good leadership, motivation, enforcement of discipline, a meaningful welfare, and a constant pulse on what is happening amongst the troops. That means the distance between the leader and the led must reduce. He must know what is happening. If he doesn't know what is happening, then he cannot deal with the situation. But what is inadequate is that little attention is paid to the mental health of the soldiers. Uh, all leaders are supposed to formally interview their subordinates at all levels. In fact, as a company commander, I used to interview every individual almost every week, 100 of them. I just set aside a particular time, met the person for short duration, 3-4 minutes, asked him if he's having any problem and other things. This contact, then he's able to tell you what problem he's facing, what stress he's facing. Now, so inadequate attention is paid to the psychological and emotional well-being of soldiers. The psychiatrist treatment, that is for freer cases of mental disorders, are only available at major hospitals. And the procedure that has been spelled out by the army of filling forms and sending them under armed escort is rather humiliating and antiquated, which needs to be changed. But more important is that normal, uh, psychological care and of the soldiers and counseling when they're undergoing some kind of disturbance, some kind of stress, or even if nothing at all, just a chat with somebody who is willing to ask him as to what is happening. How's the family? How are you? How's the work, etc. Normally, the leaders, as I said, should be doing it all the time. But leaders are not experts on this. They cannot gauge all these things. Then the army tried to fill this void by employing the religious teachers who are authorized at the scale of, depending upon a particular religion, that the minimum. So if there are 120 or more soldiers, then a religious teacher is authorized. He's a JSO. No, basically a spiritual teacher. He doesn't have any background of psychology. So what the army has done is given him some rudimentary training at the military institute of integration, and which is where they all get undergo a course before they are sent down to the units. Uh, so they are supposed to do counseling, but it's not formalized. They just if they come to know, well, so and so are disturbed, just start talking to him in the spiritual context. And same way also, we had what is called the army education instructors, who were supposed to upgrade the education qualifications of the soldiers over a period of time. There are various exams in the army. The soldiers are given a chance to improve their education qualifications. So similar, this thing has been done with them. There used to be 4 to 6 authorized in a for 1,000 people and 1,000 soldiers, and they were also being trained in a similar manner. But this is what I would say is not formalized. It is a kind of uh, amateurish and inadequate and informal effort. What I have suggested in the end, and what the army lacks, and what the army must do, armed forces must do, is that we need to induct trained psychologists. And since they are professionals, we can induct them as territorial army officers who can come for short durations, then go back. And this will also open the avenue for a large number of psychologists. I had worked out a rough yardstick that they can be there at the scale of one per brigade, where brigade has a strength of about 3,000 odd personnel. Then they can organize more meaningful training, and also, with the help of the leaders, identify the disturbed individuals, and then conduct proper formalized counseling. And then everybody should be educated in this regard, that it is not a stigma. In earlier times, I remember as a junior officer, and I sort of uh, I don't have fond memories of this particular aspect. That when we used to find that a soldier was a little disturbed, a nickname was given to him. कि he is ये mental हो गया है, mental हो गया है. So sometimes he was nicknamed mental, just like you have seen a movie was also made on the subject, so and so mental. So ये mental हो गया. A very demeaning thing. And if I have to live it all over again, I would probably send that person, I would console him, I would probably send him for counseling. But at that time, we just took it as there is just the way of life. So to and what I have given you, the remedies, the same remedies are there for cases of suicide. We have already had the first suicide of uh, the first Agniveer of the Indian Army, and a young soldier. Mm, and then to add insult to the injury, uh, his remains were sent in a civil hospital, a civil ambulance instead of a military vehicle. And of course, the army has given a statement clarifying all this, but the damage has been done. So, in all cases of fratricide, all cases of suicide, also, it's common. The mental well-being of the soldier, and this can, and we can remedy it if the army pays attention to it, and we induct qualified psychologists and have a more formalized approach.
Well, thank you, General. I think you brought up some very interesting points about a issue that, while it has been in the media, has not been discussed as heavily, which is fratricide and suicide within the Indian Armed Forces. What are some of the causes, the trends that the army has seen over the years, and what the Indian Army can do to take some formal steps in preventing fratricide in the future. So, for viewers interested in reading the full article by General Panag, the link to it will be in the description below. Thank you, and we will see you next week.